Y'all, let's start that slow clap out for Christy. Is she in here? She was right there. This may be, there she comes. There she comes. Huh, there she comes. What? There she comes. What? There she comes. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Christy.
Thank you guys. Like they said, I am a builder, so I'm much more comfortable with a drill than this clicker, but we're gonna try to get through it. And if you see my heart or hear my heart beating out of my chest, that is why. Like that great intro, I am a solo builder, which means I'm typically in the woods or a jungle or on a mountain, building by myself pretty much the whole time. So I seek out the land, I build something, and then I rent it out, and I hold on to them forever. There we go. So this started about 10 years ago when I decided that I wanted to build a treehouse in a jungle. And because America doesn't have a lot of jungle, that narrowed my options to Hawaii. And at that time, and even still, there's really cheap land on the rainy side of the Big Island. And so I got on Craigslist. I found a listing for this little over a half-acre lot for $8,000. A guy in Indiana was selling it. I called him up, and we kind of hit it off. Him and his wife were selling all of their belongings and retiring at 40. I think I was 29, 30 at this point. And so we kind of just vibed on the whole minimalist thing. He let me have, it was $8,000, so he let me put $1,000 down. I paid $200 a month for 3 years for this property. Yeah. And at the time, I worked in a factory, a plastics recycling factory. That's kind of my background. And so this was going to be all my money, which was not a lot of money. It cost me $11,000 to build. I bought that pickup truck for $800 once I got to the island. I broke down everywhere on the Big Island. And I went there 8 months later. My mom came with me. That's kind of how I have a building background. And she stayed with me until I had a roof, and then she pieced out, and I was left there the next couple months to finish it up to what it is now. Thank you. You guys are so sweet. So my thinking back then was this was like a 3-day decision, like the idea, the calling the guy, the purchasing it. My thinking was I had never stayed in an Airbnb at this point. Nobody I knew what Airbnb was. But I thought that if this thing works and I can rent it for 8 days a month, that would replace my factory job income. And if it's a total bust and it doesn't work out, then I have a tree house in Hawaii for my family and friends. So not a bad deal. Luckily, though, it started renting out pretty well, and a month in, I was booked solid. So from the success of that, I was able to purchase my next piece of land, which was in Chelan, Washington. Yeah, by the way, I live in Idaho, so none of these properties make any sense. But I knew I wanted to build a hobbit hole. I wanted to do something completely different than I had just spent all this time, building in the trees. So now I was going to go underground. So I spent a couple weeks marking on Zillow to the lowest the little slider can go, which I think at that time was $20,000. And I looked at every lot in Oregon and Washington that was under $20,000. And I found this 5.5-acre parcel for $18,000. It's completely off-grid, so is the treehouse. And I constructed that in 2014. The average guest has to wait over 400 days to stay here. A fire lookout was on my short list of interesting builds that I wanted to do, but if you know about fire lookouts, they are on Forest Service land, and so they have to be decommissioned and taken down, and then you would buy that structure, and then you would re-erect it onto private land. Well, I was researching that process, and I found an old blog post about this lookout being for sale in North Idaho. Finally, an Idaho property. Still about 7.5 hours away from Boise, but still. And so I couldn't find any information on it. I finally found that a radio station had posted about it, again, over a year ago on their site. I read through the comments. I finally got to who the listing realtor was. I got a hold of him, and I sent this email at like 11 o'clock at night and said, hey, I know this is probably was sold forever ago, but is there any chance that this is available? And he looked it up, and he's like, oh, actually, the listing just expired. We didn't realize it. So everybody else has lost, my gain. I said, I'll be there in a couple days. I went up and bought this property. This was my most expensive property to date because it already had a building, which I had to, totally remodel it. Nobody had been in it for about 25 years. So this tower had already been taken down. The guy, and he ended up being my first guest. The history of it is, it was in Washington. They sold it to this guy for $1 on the condition that he take it down within a month. And he did that, brought it all back, re-erected it in 1983. And he sold all the trees on the property to pay for the land. So he was in it $0. But by the time I got to it, 30 years later, it's like this great forest, and there's huckleberries everywhere. Really amazing. That's not who I bought it from. I bought it from this old couple. I also want to say that none of the properties that I bought were listed as seller finance, and I've bought everything through seller finance and just asked if they would. So that one's been featured in a bunch of things. It's in the cabin porn book, if anybody has that. And we've been going since 2017. Then the potato, not what I thought would be my legacy, but it kind of turns out that is the case. So why I had to wait 8 months to go to Hawaii to build that treehouse is because my friend sent me a job listing to be a spokesperson for Idaho Potatoes. They were sending it to me to make fun of me as a joke because I am, Idaho represent. I worked at a potato factory for the fun of it. And so they sent me this job listing saying oh my gosh, this is so funny. And I took it seriously and was like, that sounds like a dream job. And it was. So the Idaho Potato Commission made this, they have a semi-truck that hauls that potato on the back of it, and it traveled all around the country doing, the Kentucky Derby to a 99-year-old's birthday party in Nebraska. I mean, we went everywhere, and it was like the time of my life. I also had already bought that land in Hawaii, but I had to go on this 8-month tour, but I got to stay in hotels for over 200 consecutive nights, and I learned a lot there as well. So when that was only supposed to happen for a year, it was so popular that it continued to go on, and it's still going on today, but they retired the original concrete 6-ton potato because it's not really meant to travel the distances that it did, and they upgraded to a more roadworthy fiberglass, thinner option, and they ended up gifting me the old potato, and I made it into an Airbnb. So I had actually been calling dibs on this potato for years, and my friends were just like, oh my God, stop, But so when I told the Idaho Potato Commission, when I heard they were gonna, have a new one made, I said, hey, remember me? We stayed in touch, but I asked if I could have it. I petitioned it, so I went and presented to them. At that time, I had some successful things, and they didn't really know what they were gonna do with it, so they were like, well, yeah. When this launched, and I also thought, this is in a field. My other places are really beautiful, in beautiful locales. This is literally a railroad track and nothingness out there. And so I thought this one wasn't going to be as popular, wasn't going to do as good. I'd probably have to charge less. Hasn't been the case. So in the Potato Commission tracks anytime they are mentioned in a news article or a newscast. So when this launched their first week, they equated that they got $2 million worth of free press. And it's continued to serve them very well. So then, as a builder, if anybody develops and builds, you'll know that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So I thought I would do a prefab house because that would be so easy. Not the case. I got this, what I call the cocoon cottage, from a builder in Estonia. And I had them keep the inside raw so I could kind of make that part my own. But because of supply chain issues, and this went out the same time as the Suez Canal got blocked, what was originally supposed to be a 6,000 door-to-door delivery and $6,000, 30-day to 45 days, ended up being almost $50,000, and it took 9 months to get here. So it was horrendous, but it's very cute. This is in Oregon on the coast, on a lake, but it's only about 5 minutes from the ocean, and this is a boat access only property. This one I just finished up a couple months ago, and this has been a long project, so this is what I call the shipwreck house, because somebody had built a structure shaped as a ship, but that whole part with the windows there, that looked like it had got hit by a cannonball. So that actually didn't exist. There's only remnants of it. And I just knew that this property, when somebody sent it to me, was going to be torn down. It was in a condemned condition. And I thought it was so cool that somebody in the 60s just did this for the fun of it, which is right up my alley. And so I got that. This is my first single family home, which has been really fun in terms of experience design, because there is an epic treasure hunt that takes the whole family participation in about 4 hours to complete. And it leads to a key, which then you unlock a coffee table, and below the house there is a whole treasure room. This is where I just came from in Wallace, Idaho, for the last month and a half, working on that until I got snowed out a couple days ago. So I decided from the time that I had got the fire lookout in Fernwood, which is over the mountain, that I really wanted to build a fire lookout museum. I got super into the history of it and wanted to do these other towers. So this is kind of a twist on the traditional fire lookout with a smart glass roof for stargazing, and our bathroom and saunas are in that other little structure. And I decided to put it on Indiegogo and try to raise the capital for it by allowing guests to pre-book their stay before it was built. I think this number is 440,000 now, because I don't know, the campaign has ended, but still I get bookings. I'm not sure how that all works. And it was a ton of work. I finished in August, so if you have crowdfunding questions, I don't know that I can answer them objectively, because I still feel a little like torn from the process, but it was really gratifying to see that so many people were willing to pay $600 for something that's not even built yet, is super encouraging, and the proof of concept is already there. Another benefit of it was typically I'm going into these really rural, small towns, and I stick out like a sore thumb, because everybody there has lived with each other for their whole lives. And so it's a gradual process of getting to know the town and how it clicks and who's part of it and how things work. At the Cocoon Cottage, I didn't know how to get mail forever, and finally somebody told me you have to put a mailbox on your dock and it comes 3 days a week via boat. So the advantage of doing this is when I arrived in Wallace a couple months ago, everywhere I went, people knew who I was already, knew about the project, and were super excited about it. And that's been like above and beyond a very cool head start. Okay, so now to the experience design. I like to think about the experience starts when they book, not when they're unlocking your door. And so every property is so different that we do different things. So with the Hobbit Hole, I had these Tolkien-style maps designed, and we send this out in our link 7 days before they arrive. But I noticed really early on that almost everybody was purchasing this for the Hobbit lover in their life. It wasn't the Hobbit lover purchasing it. And so they were giving it as a gift. And so I added the "We're going on an adventure," which is a Hobbit thing, to the center of it, and we made this into a printable PDF. So now when somebody mentions that they're giving this as a gift in their original, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited, my girlfriend is the biggest Hobbit fan ever," we say, "Awesome, we actually have this PDF that you can print if you want to give her something tangible," and it folds into thirds, and it has this "We're going on an adventure" on the front. Another thing with like priming your guests, a lot of people get a lot of the joy of planning the vacation before the vacation even starts. And so what I did not realize, and definitely should have, when I built the treehouse, it's all honeymooners that stay there. And luckily for me, it kind of ended up with a romantic vibe, but that wasn't intentional. So I wrote an article for people going on their honeymoon in Hawaii. So then when they would message us, say, "We're going here for our honeymoon," we send them this link that said, "Hey, you can check this out." And we do some priming with that. So number 4 on this 5 things to do is to kiss in the rain. And we have the image of Ryan Gosling in The Notebook. And because rain would ruin most people's vacation. Nobody wants to go to Hawaii and anticipates it's going to be rainy the whole time. On our side of the island, however, it's probably going to rain at some point during the day. And so we just like prime that already with like, you're on this romantic vacation. This is the most romantic thing you can do. Make out. I have this part highlighted. This is in 2016. Christy's guidebook was extremely thorough and full of local tips. I just found out she has another Airbnb in Washington modeled after a Hobbit house. I don't know if planning vacations around Airbnb hosts is a thing, but I think Christy might be making it one. Yeah. So this screenshot is from a video. My guests make the most epic content for me. I suck at that part, but they are so creative and talented that they made this stunning video. But this kind of shows the road getting there. Most of my properties, all of my properties, are on dirt roads, some of them worse than others. And so throughout all of our messaging, we are sure to include that rough roads lead to beautiful destinations, priming them that it's going to be a bit more than, checking into the Holiday Inn. At the Lookout as well, I thought originally this was going to be a seasonal cabin because there's 6 months of no snow and 6 months of snow. So when I went up there, hoofed it up in the snow, it was too beautiful not to have it open in the wintertime. And so then my wheels started turning on how can I get guests up here? And so I bought this 1964 vintage Thickle Snowcat. And I know nothing about mechanics, which I've learned a lot over the years. But I remodeled the back to be super cute, and it's all windows. And we now sell a Winter Wonderland experience. It's an add-on. We only have maybe 4 people a year that don't come up in our Snowcat, that either have snowmobiles or they're skiing or something like that. But everybody adds this to their trip, and they'll meet the Snowcat driver. He'll load up their bags. He greets them with some thermoses of hot cocoa, and inside we have a little bar with Baileys and marshmallows and whip. So it's a pretty long ride. It's at least a half an hour, depending on where the snow is. It can be an hour to get up there. This was a video. We had to X the videos out, so now you just get funny screen grabs of my face. This is at the Cocoon Cottage. That is the dock area. That little building is the sauna, and then there's a fire pit with a bench, just so you know what you're looking at. This is me and my friend Whitney. She actually discovered this town lakeside, and so we went to go look for land for her, and then I ended up buying something. But when we arrived, we stayed in an Airbnb that was super well done, but it was boat access only. So we went to the little family-owned marina. There's like bait and hooks and, like out of a movie set. And with like one signature and a 1-minute rundown on how to operate a boat, they gave us the keys. And so now looking at that experience, and every time I think about that trip with Whitney, it is, even though the Airbnb was great, no complaints, it's always that boat ride. When we did something new for the first time that was like a little, maybe dangerous, they top out at like 15 miles per hour. So even though my Cocoon Cottage does have a way to get there via road, we make guests come with the boat. Again, with the construction photos, I don't have a lot of photos, I have a lot of videos of construction. So this is midway through. This isn't something that was intentional in the beginning, but I noticed I kept doing this, which was creating a portal, essentially that when your guests arrive, instead of just the door, something that they have to go through. And I feel like it's this, you're being a transition point, that you're leaving your old life. And so this is a moon gate with logs that I did at the Cocoon House. We have trap doors or a bamboo arbor like we do at the tree house. Of course, the round door at the Hobbit. Another thing that I do also just end up doing is that none of my places, you can't park at the house. Your car is always a little far in the distance. You can't see your car from my house, because I feel like that also can take away from the experience. If you're in a timeless Hobbit hole in your brand new SUV, it would be convenient, but I think I could make an argument for my guests are looking for inconvenient. So the highlighted part here is we felt transported to Middle Earth in this wintry wonderland above the clouds. It was magical, one of a kind, unforgettable experience. Okay, this is my favorite thing. All the special little details that you can sprinkle throughout your stay. It would be too long to go through each one, so I'm just going to highlight some different things that we have. But I think instead of having just like a welcome basket, for the guests to be constantly surprised by the different offerings throughout their stay is really fun. And this person says, we kept finding cute Easter eggs. She means that in a Taylor Swift sort of version, that made the experience more unique as time went on. In the grain silo is actually, at the Potato, is where the bathroom is housed. So people are oftentimes surprised at how nice it is. And we have this huge trough tub. I say it's a 2-person tub because that's our occupancy, but you could probably fit 4 to 6 people in there. And I had this fireplace. And so for the mantle, what you see there is these are different Epsom salts. And depending on the flower on top, it indicates what scent it is. So people love mixing and matching. We get reviews all the time that people took multiple baths because it was just such a fun experience. Another thing with kind of priming your guests, and again, I do have fresh flowers in the Potato, but I can't do that up in the mountains in a town of 400. I don't know even where the nearest florist would be. But we do what I call is this kindling package. And you'll see it basically, it is a lunch sack with a bunch of sticks from our property, and then we put in some lavender and sage and mountain mint in there. But the really special thing, so it makes like this dried flower bouquet, but the special thing is that tag that I made that goes around it. And on the back of it, it says, this kindling package is for your first fire at the lookout. And everybody has to start a fire. They're going to get their bags up there, and that's going to be the first thing they do. And it says, take some time to write what your intention is for this trip on the back of this card. You burn it with your logs to start it. And it's really hard to have a bad time if you just wrote down that I want to reconnect with my spouse or I'm looking to get away. And so doing those sort of things, getting into their head a little bit, will help them have a good time. At the treehouse, I had these postcards made. The designer made them off of different people's Instagram posts. We have several more, but we leave a couple of these pre-stamped in our house. And in the guidebook, it says, you're free to write a message and we will send them out for you. But if you don't have anybody to send that postcard to, a little prompt we give is you guys could send a note to each other. And then, after the week of your honeymoon, you get back and you forgot all about it, these postcards show up in the mail. Okay, and the ultimate experience is if you can get a cow that is paid dividends. She's actually more popular than the potato now. Dolly is a star. She is a 1,200-pound Jersey cow that lives at the potato, and she came from a farm, a homestead near my hobbit hole, actually, and she wasn't getting along with the other farm animals. So I was like, I have the perfect place for her. And she loves humans. She hates other animals. And she's just the sweetest thing. The potato's kind of a roadside attraction, too. So the public can come by, and we have visitor log where it just asks the date, their name, where they're from, and their favorite way to eat potatoes. And we have a little treat bin for Dolly. We had to limit the treats, so she runs out of those at about 11 o'clock, and people get disappointed. But she was getting a little big. We also have these Idaho potato pins, and so in elementary school in Idaho, whenever somebody from the state came, you would get one of those pins. So they actually have newer, updated ones, but I stuck with the vintage ones. So we also leave a couple of those for guests. This is at the Cocoon Cottage, and my shower was kind of an experimental thing that turned out really well. As I took a bunch of dried flowers, if you see resin jewelry with a little flower in that, I did that, but with shower panels. So it was quite the experiment. So now the glass shower, you have all these petals, the light comes through, it's really beautiful. So kind of as an homage to that, we have a little library in most of the places. So like I said, I'm building alone most of the time. That leaves a lot of time for audiobooks. And so I try to listen to books on the theme of what I'm building. So in Oregon, that cocoon house, what does that even look like in a book? I read a lot of Oregon-based authors, Secret Garden, those sort of botanical books. And so I put these dried flowers that were extra from that project into the books. And when they arrive, this little frame, so that opens up, it's two pieces of glass that you press your flower into, is there. And there's a little note that says, this is where you can find the flowers, make a little keepsake to take home. And this is from a little girl who, even when they got home, she has a new hobby, and she's trying to speed up the process of pressing the flowers by standing on the book. So I think in general, my main motivation, what I get a lot of joy from is when people can create memories. And I think that memories are created. We don't have TVs, we don't have Wi-Fi, we don't have power at several. But if you can get people to disconnect and be in the moment and try something new, maybe a little hard, like throwing a hatchet or driving a boat for the first time, that's going to be a good memory that sticks. And if that sort of stuff is interesting to you, there's not any books that I know of on the topic, but these two books have a lot of overlap. So The Art of Gathering, it's more about creating parties, dinner parties and stuff, but there's a lot of overlap. And then Unreasonable Hospitality, I think, is a must-read for short-term rental hosts, and that takes place in a restaurant, but there is a ton of overlap there. So that's my speech. Thank you, guys. I was so nervous. Thank you.
Wow, Christy, that is incredible. Here's the funny part about this. As she was walking on stage, she's like, I'm not very good at this whole speaking thing,
oh
so
gosh.
I don't really know how this is going to go. How do y'all think that went?
You guys are so
You can hold on to that.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that was incredible. I think we have some questions. Would you be
Oh,
willing
okay.
to take a few?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
go
cool?
ahead.
Excellent.
Either one.
Let's come. You already. Oh. Yeah, go ahead. Just whatever you got to do, bro.
So, first of all, that was amazing. I'm
Thank
like
you.
totally jealous of what you created. It's awesome. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you design all the processes to make sure all these amenities are in place and nothing gets missed, because there's so much going on.
Do you mean in terms of the caretaker making sure that all of that is executed, or the
Yeah.
ideas?
A little bit about like the execution of it.
Okay, yeah. So in each of these places, I hire caretakers. I found with my first place, I hired for a housekeeper, and I found that when I switched the verbiage to caretaker instead of housekeeper, my applicants became a lot more in line with what I'm doing. And it's actually a better description of the job in terms of my places. So they know that they're going to be an innkeeper and that this stuff is what makes it special. So it is a little hard from an inventory standpoint because not everything that we have is on Amazon. But we just know, I have a list and we know these few things that we have to order outside of that. But because my caretakers, this is their only job. So they work for me exclusively. I usually hire an older couple. That hasn't always been the case, but these people have been with me for years and years, and they take a lot of pride. I also think it helps with it being in a smaller town. Everybody in that town is going to know about XYZ property. And so they kind of have like an esteemable job there. And so another thing that I found that works really well with the caretakers is that I totally messed up my first caretaker go around was that I was only reaching out to her when something was wrong. Like, oh, hey, that wasn't there for them. And they read in the review that there was going to be postcards and the postcards weren't there, that sort of stuff, or something going wrong. Well, then now, and I have been doing for years, I send my caretakers every review I get. So it kind of right-sizes the problems for them, and they don't get all discouraged, and they can see all the praise for what they're doing. If anybody has complaints about cleaning fees, not to go off on a tangent, but something I do in my guidebooks is I include a page at About Us of the caretakers. And it's really hard to feel stingy about a cleaning fee when you see the people that you are supporting. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah, so the creative process is kind of just where I live. And I think it is helpful to have a lot of alone time and listening to those books on the theme. I mean, the amount of pirate stuff that I've listened to, which is not my genre at all, but even getting like certain verbiage and knowledge of like how a ship is formed and where the crew sleeps and things like that, I pick up along the way. So I kind of try to fully immerse myself in whatever I can with that. And a lot of it is happening while I'm building. And those are the best days when I come up with an idea. That's the most fun part. And then stay all night researching it.
We got one over here.
Thank you again. That was awesome. Two-part. Are you traveling with your builder? Is this the same builder you're using for each product? And for each project? And can you speak to any consulting services that you may offer?
So I am the builder.
Boss. Like a boss.
In preparation for this talk, I actually went on ChatGPT to say, like, what? There isn't a term, because when you say I built a house, somebody built your house. But, so there's not a real term for I'm out there building it. I do the electrical and plumbing and all the things. They're quite small, so it's not, if you look at it like it's kind of like a playhouse, then it's less intimidating. But I have, like, my mom comes out for a few days or things like that. And if I do have a family member or friend coming out, then I make sure that I schedule like the things that I need two people for. But more or less, it's just me. I've been pouring footings, and I had an excavator come and help me dig and put the sonotubes in. And then, I'm calling the concrete truck. They're coming out. I'm placing the things, the whole bit. Yeah.
That's all. Now, is your mom hireable? Since you're not? Or,
She will definitely
Okay,
say
all right,
no, but she
okay.
would be a great resource.
Nick, you got somebody?
Nobody over
No,
here.
like over here?
I got one. Blue shirt over here. Will you stand up for your question?
So do you do these all on your own, or do you like have partnerships? I know building and is a whole animal on its own. Then there's the operational side of things. So
Yes, I'm getting better at having people. So I recently hired a manager. That was a big step for me a couple months ago, and it's going really well. But I use a lot of the systems. Like I have been using Guesty since day one. I would probably have one property without Guesty. Truly a huge help. But in terms of like a team, it's kind of me and my caretakers, and now I have, because I knew I was going to be out of cell service on this new project, I had to get somebody in for the one-off questions that we inevitably get. And so that's going well. And I guess I didn't ever like think of it before as like, oh yeah, I don't know if anybody knows the Bolts from Bolt Tree Farm, but when I was talking to Seth, he's like, yeah, you're doing the developing, you're the electrician, you're this, that. And to me, it just is all one thing. And so I think there's a lot of benefit to that. Me being the builder and the designer, I can know where that outlet needs to go and how that's going to be used. And somebody wants to plug in their USB by their bed and not have a long cord. So I think it all really melds together, but it's not a very quick process. And up until just very recently, I have just bootstrapped everything. That's probably why it hasn't scaled super quickly. But I recently partnered with Kazoo and Caden to get some funding, and we're going to try that on a build I'm tackling this winter, which is a terrarium house is what I call it, but it's a greenhouse over a house.
and one other quick question: that metal thing that you had with like all that firewood, what was that metal thing?
Yeah, it was off of Overstock, and I think it cost $80. It's a ring that they use for like wedding arches, and then I had a bunch of logs there, so I just put those around them.
Christy, this was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So you did mention one of your properties is booked like 400 days out for a wait list. So what's the average wait list to get into, like in general, any of your properties? And do you have a direct booking site or just solely go through Airbnb?
Yeah, I solely book through Airbnb. One, because I love them. Two, because I have no time to do a direct booking. And three, because lots of my properties aren't insurable because they're so weird. So having Airbnb's liability and property damage, even though I haven't had to use them, that just gives me peace of mind. So I'm kind of going that route until they give me a reason not to. But it's been 10 years, and I feel like I've just exclusively been on there. How long are they booked out? The other places, I would say it's about 2 to 3 months. However, we do have cancellations pretty frequently because somebody's been holding on to that reservation for so long. And then if we do have a cancellation, we'll put that up on our social media and try to get it rebooked so that way the guests can get their money back. So unless it's like a day of cancellation, we probably are booked.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm inspired. And I wanted to ask, could you elaborate on the process of finding the caretakers? How do you recruit them, and what criteria do you use to determine if that person is going to be a good caretaker?
Yeah, so I got quite a few like great people. Like my caretakers are really my favorite people in the world. They're just like exceptional human beings, and so how could I be so lucky? One thing that I noticed that they all have in common, and something my treehouse lady that I had forever during COVID, her husband launched a food truck. It ended up being really successful, and so she finally left me, and we got new people. But the thing that when I looked at everybody I have and what's the common denominator, is really they're super positive people. And so when I'm getting somebody's application, I will say, okay, is there any negativity in here? Like, well, how far of a drive is it? Do you cover fuel? You know, like those sort of things. Or even if I'm on a phone call, I could kind of prime it and be like, if I come to you and I say, oh yeah, it's really hot outside, and you're like, oh yeah, sucks, you know, my people, they wouldn't do that. They would say, oh, but it's beautiful. They'll find the positive. That is the consistent thing throughout them. So when I have a messy guest, they say, they had a really good time here. And they're just amazing. So that's like the number one thing. Anybody can clean. I'm the messiest human, and if I need to do a turnover, I can do a turnover. I need reliability. So I have had people that had the gal in Hawaii, she did have young kids. She had a baby during her, time with me and stuff. But right now, I think almost everybody is kind of that retirement age. I would say they're in their late 50s or 60s. And also because my places are rural, there might not be a lot of job opportunities. So my potato caretaker, I knew him before I had started, but not a lot. I just met him a few times. I had that property for 10 years out there, and I kept telling my mom, we were like finishing this, and she's like, you have got to hire somebody. And I said, I keep telling you, I'm gonna hire Steve. I haven't seen him in like 3 years, mind you. He comes in while we are grouting a floor, and he's like, what are you doing here? What do you got going on? And he was like, well, do you need anybody to help? And my mom threw down her trowel, like, you got to be kidding me. I get what I want. So, yeah, I would say the common denominator is them being positive.
When it comes to creating a new idea, are you finding an area that you like first and then creating the perfect experience for that area? Or are you first having this awesome idea and then you go search for the perfect location?
Yeah, it's the structure first for me. So I have a structure in mind, or even like a type of construction that I would like to try, and then I go seek out a landscape that would fit that.
Love it. Coming to you, friend. You
Got one
Nick?
question over here. Yep.
Go ahead, Nick.
So you were talking about your upsells, like your Snowcat going up and staying primarily on Airbnb. How are you managing all of those different upsell experiences and making sure that logistically they all happen?
Yeah, there's not a great way to do it. I would say the only add-on that we charge extra for would be the Snowcat. And so what we tell them is if you want to add this, let us know. And then we send them a special offer request. So we will request the $100. And it is an upsell, but it's not really an upsell. The sell is that they're staying in my house and I get that revenue. So the cost of the Snowcat is just covering the transport and the fuel, essentially.
If they're booking in the winter, do they know that they have to have the Snowcat to get up there?
Yes.
Okay.
Except for if somebody doesn't read anything. But yeah, and we do then send them another message, just FYI, we have this option, but if you want to bring your own snowmobiles or whatever, you can, and then everybody picks that.
Same with the boat to the places that are only boat accessible. Do they know that, and how do you coordinate that with? Is it a local or?
Yeah, so the marina just handles that. I looked into getting my own boat and stocking it there, and maybe I will in the future. But for now, they already have that whole thing set up, and I don't know that it's a whole, that there's a lot of money to be made there. So I haven't done that, but I just tell them this is where you rent your boat.
As far as dynamic pricing goes, there's not really a mold for what you do. How do you determine that, especially with the demand that you have?
Yeah, when Airbnb suggests what the price should be on a 200 square foot place without Wi-Fi, it pops out $48 or something. So I've kind of just felt it out. I'm probably underpriced, really, but I think my sweet spot for those small places is around the $300 mark, and I feel like with that, people usually, if you see your value start dropping, then I also, because I am a poor kid, raised a poor kid, poor kid mentality. And so I started the treehouse, I think at like $199, and vastly under what was available in Hawaii. And then I had read, like when I was 15 in a Sunset magazine, that there were these tree houses in the redwoods, and on full moons, you got a half price discount, which I just thought was a cool marketing idea. And so I implemented that on my page. Well, I had to take it off in Quick Report because the people that stayed were specifically staying for the half price, and they were as many of you know, the cheaper that they get it at, they're the worst guests, So I was like, got to get that out of there. And so that's just kind of my sweet spot. And the hard thing is, and maybe it's not smart, there's no strategy behind this, is that my calendar is just open. But if I were only willing to open it up a few months at a time, I could kind of play with that a bit more. But because if I change my price right now for the Hobbit hole, it's going to be effective in 2025,
Hi. Okay, you're officially my new role model. Absolutely amazing. My question is about analysis paralysis. So hearing that you just buy this property off the grid, my mind says, and I am a visionary like you, I can dream it up, but my mind says I have to solve X, Y, and Z before I can even commit to this, right? Like, how are they going to have power? How is this going to happen? How did you like make that action, at least the first time, and then thereafter, what advice would you give someone who really wants it and even has the wherewithal to do it, but is a little nervous?
I live by this motto that everything is figure-outable. And so while I don't know how I'm gonna do it, I am strong-willed enough that it will be done. In fact, when I was fighting the city with the potato, because they didn't know I was doing that and I didn't think I had to ask, and then a very famous YouTuber came and all of a sudden the county was at my door. We were trying to find a way for this to work, and I ended up building a tiny house that became a primary resident, and that became a sleeping quarters. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But in between these very heated negotiations with the city, they're like, we don't have to let this happen, because I'm operating that this is happening. And I said, you need 50 residents to make a town, and if I have to make this a town, I will make this its own town with our own rules. And I was willing to do that. Thank goodness I didn't have to, but that's kind of, I don't always get my way. I feel like I'm pretty reasonable, but there's got to be a way, So if somebody, or even in your own mind, if there's like, well, I don't know how I'll figure out this, I just keep going, and I'm like, it's not plan B, it's really like plan Q on everything I do that ends up working out.
All right, question over here.
Hi. So I think maybe it's a little unfair. I tend to first assume that our guests are going to be maybe a little less capable, or they're going to just hurt themselves somehow. So, for lack of a better way. So while I love the idea of building an experience, maybe even like hatchet throwing and things like that, I just am starting out on the side where I have zero trust in my guests. Do you have any advice on, first, how do you see your guests, and how do you build trust with them to trust that they will not, totally hurt themselves or ruin something or whatever?
That's where that liability insurance comes in. No, nobody has ever got hurt. But I do some intentional planning. I am not much of a worrier, so there's that. But on the treehouse, you'll see that it doesn't have a solid rail. It has a rope rail in between. That's entirely intentional. If I were to put a solid rail on there, you have a glass of wine, you're sitting up on the railing taking cute pics, I'm like, they're gonna fall over. But having a rope, it makes you a little nervous. You stay a little to the inside. So on everything, I kind of think about that. With the treasure room at the ship house, that was a whole other thing. I don't have kids, and so Marco Polo and my family, how can this go wrong? And then I tried to design around it. So originally it was just gonna be a trap door, and they're like, nope, that trap door is gonna be open, they're gonna lock their siblings in there, people are gonna fall in it, all that stuff. So the solution was this giant coffee table that locks, that now it's like a stairway in there, and it's very hard to lock from the outside. So while I don't worry, I do keep in mind also, like the city slicker doesn't want to come to the lookout, and if somebody, you can kind of find in their messaging, if they're like, well, how high is the tree house? I'm like, it's not for you. Or you know, like, you should probably find a different place. And Guesty does a great job at saying that. Or like, oh, I'm a solo female, like, how safe is this, or whatever. And I'm like, well, I lived there for months at a time alone, but again, it's probably not for you. You, like, lots of the places don't have locks, you know? So by the person who wants to either rent or get a four-wheel drive vehicle to drive up this crazy mountain road, so they're well aware of these things in the beginning, and know that if you want heat, you're gonna have to start a fire. I'm kind of pre-selecting the kind of person who wants to go there in the first place.
Christy, we got 2 more questions. You got time for 2 more?
Yeah.
Yep.
This
we got
is
one
way
here and then one over
easier than giving the speech, by the way.
So my question is how do you deal with like the planning and zoning and building inspectors and things like that with some of these unique properties? I mean, how does that fly?
Build out as far as you can away from them, which isn't a joke. It's the least fun part of my job, and at the beginning I didn't, but now that I am like known and we have like very influential people staying there, now I know that this is going to get a ton of publicity, and seek them out in the beginning. Dealing with them, the Oregon property has been a real challenge. It was done for like a year, and I think we're this close to it being rectified, but because there's new rules every time I go in there, and it's been truly one of the most frustrating things that I deal with. And I try to put myself in their shoes, that this is just more work for them, you know. And if I go in saying that I'm going to do this, they might shut it down from the get-go. So I look up, what can I do? Like, is there anything that says I can't do this? You know, and I try to circumvent that as much as possible, and then be like, hey, I don't want to be a pain in your ass. Like, I know that this is so weird, and you don't think anybody's gonna come, but I really want to do this. So and the people that are in those jobs aren't creatives, you know, and so I try to keep that in mind too. They're just like, do not know what this ridiculous person keeps showing up in their office for, but I just keep showing up.
Hi, you were so amazing.
Thank you.
I'm just so blown away by you. It's just, I want to do what you're doing. I would
Come,
love to do
do
that.
it.
Yes, please. I'm serious. So I don't know if I missed this at the beginning. So how did you get like your skill level to be the builder, the electrician, the plumbing, all that?
Yeah. My dad is a retired high school teacher. My mom was essentially a stay-at-home mom. There's 6 kids. We had 0 money. And so in our houses, she would remodel them to fit our family. So I grew up, my dad's not a project person, my mom is. So I grew up with a mom that really just like took the bull by the horns. And the memory that comes to mind most often when I'm talking about her is one day in 4th grade, I go to school, we don't have a sidewalk. I get home from school and we have a sidewalk, and there was no intention, there was no plan for a sidewalk in the morning. But somebody else in the neighborhood, she saw a concrete truck going, she went and saw them, they said, well, we have extra, we can pour the extra in front. She goes, gets some wood, builds a frame, and we have a sidewalk. So I think I had a good skill set, and I always was like remodeling and decorating and doing crazy stuff on the side of my mostly like factory work. So I'm pretty handy and I know the tools. But because I pick a completely different build each time, I learn so much each time. And YouTube, or now TikTok, I don't even go on YouTube anymore. I just put into TikTok what I'm trying to learn, and or refresh. I mean, I don't know how many 3-way switches I've wired, but I have to look it up every time. And then I do like call on different people that might be good at this thing and kind of spitball, or I'll go into the concrete company or whatever it might be and be like, this is what I'm trying to do, like what makes sense for this or that, or this isn't gonna work, so what's another way I can come about it? So I got a lot of skills from just my upbringing and then have cultivated those over the 10 years.
Christy, wow. Y'all, please.
Thank you.
Christy, if I may, you can put that down here. You go. It's interesting. I think I wonder if y'all would agree with me. A lot of people that come up here and speak, I would consider aspirational when we think about our businesses, right? But this was inspirational. Really incredible messaging, and wow, what a talent! Thank you so much, friend.